Stevens Initiative here at the Aspen Institute. Welcome to this wonderful webinar that we've got planned for you on virtual exchange at community colleges. We have a wonderful lineup for you today. We've got three wonderful panelists who are going to be with us today. First is Jim Bensley, who's the Director of International Services and Service Learning at Northwestern Michigan College. Jim, thanks for being with us today. Next is Sheila Lucas, who is the Director of the Office of Health Sciences Advisement and an instructor in American Sign Language at Santa Fe College. And last but certainly not least, Sherry Chibangu, who is a professor at Monroe Community College. Welcome to our three panelists. Thank you guys for being with us today. I want to just a couple of housekeeping notes that I wanted to share with everyone. If you chat box. And then finally, you can also interact with us, not just today during the webinar, but moving forward by certainly signing up for our listserv. If you go to www.stevensinitiative.org, share your email address. We'll keep you up to date on the most exciting things happening in the virtual exchange field, and certainly sharing, we will be sharing opportunities for grants and engagement with the initiative. If you do the Twitter thing, follow us at Stevens INIT on Twitter. Use the hashtag virtual exchange. And if you have any exciting stories about student virtual exchange taking place, actual virtual exchange practice taking place on your campus and in your classroom, please use the hashtag World Class Connection. We have a wonderful digital campaign that's been going live for a few months now, and it's been wonderful to see everyone's exciting stories. Just to move forward, a little bit about the Stevens Initiative. The initiative was named for Ambassador Chris Stevens, who was tragically killed in Libya a number of years ago, and there was a desire to honor him by making sure that young people learned about one another and were able to connect and really gain the skills for the 21st century. The Stevens Initiative is a program that's sponsored by the U.S. Department of State. It's managed at the Aspen Institute, and we have generous support from the Bezos Family Foundation, the Kingdom of Morocco, and the United Arab Emirates. I'm thankful to all of our sponsors who allow us to do this this great work in connecting students. I know we've got a lot of international participants, so just to give you a little bit about the context of today's discussion, for those of you who may or may not be familiar with community colleges are a type of higher education institution here in the United States. Oftentimes they are open enrollment. Sometimes they offer 2-year degree offerings for their students. Oftentimes they are oriented towards workforce development and meeting local workforce needs. And oftentimes you'll find that community colleges offer transfer credit for students to go on to further higher education, perhaps in a 4-year degree if they so choose. About 42% of America's college students are enrolled in community colleges. Oftentimes the average age of those students is about 28 years old, and they serve communities in all 50 states. I'll also share, for those of you who are new to virtual exchange and are still learning about the practice, virtual exchange is an educational practice where classrooms and the students in those classrooms are connecting with peers using both real-time synchronous technology and asynchronous technology to enhance their global perspective. So essentially, students are connecting with their peers in other geographies. I'll actually pivot at this point in time and would love to dig in with our three wonderful panelists and ask each of them to share a little bit about their virtual exchange practice. So Jim, why don't we start with you? Tell us briefly about your virtual exchange program that you have at your institution at Northwestern Michigan College. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Mohammed, and welcome to all those that are tuning in on this one. But yeah, let me just say, we started about 3 years ago with a virtual exchange through the CELIA group. It's called the CELIA Connect program. It was something that I specifically wanted to do in my classroom. I direct the International Services and Service Learning program, but I also teach in the Humanities department. So I teach a class on world cultures. And I would always bring in international students to talk to my students and have a dialogue. And we would talk about different topics, education, religion, these kind of things. And I thought, what could we do to sort of enhance that even more? Because my students on their evaluations would always say that was one of the best parts of the course, being able to connect with those students from different parts of the world. So I started looking at what was out there, and through Community Colleges for International Development, heard of the SLEA program, jumped on that as a pilot, and was sort of off to the races. Obviously there were some hurdles in the beginning, but have been using it for about 3 years and have been really pleased with how it connects my students with students specifically in the Middle East and North Africa.
Wonderful. Sherry, let's jump to you. Thank you so much for that, Jim. Sherry, tell us a little bit about your virtual exchange program that you've conducted.
Hello, everyone. Again, Sherry Chibango. I'm at Monroe Community College in Rochester, New York. Our college is actually part of the State University of New York's system, where we have 64 colleges and universities throughout the state. SUNY, that's the State University of New York, created what we call the Collaborative Online International Learning Center back in 2006. They recognized the need to prepare our students for the 21st century. And the goals were simple: to provide students with an authentic intercultural experience as part of the curriculum, and to give students an opportunity to interact and collaborate with each other in a very effective way. And so they started this initiative. There was a wonderful man by the name of Larry Dugan who came to us about 5 years ago, and he brought it to Monroe Community College. And so at Monroe Community College and throughout the system, we're embracing a slogan of global learning for all. And by the way, that includes faculty because we learn and grow as part of this initiative. And so we've been fortunate through the State University to secure funding in different parts of the world. One being with the the generous donation of the Stevens Initiative for the Middle East and North Africa, where I had the opportunity to partner with AUT in Lebanon. And we've also had other partnerships, the US and Mexico partnerships and much more. And I can share the details of the program, but I'm just so happy that they had the foresight to see that there was a need to provide virtual exchange in a cost-effective way for all of our students.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Sherry. Sheila, I want to jump to you. Tell us a little bit about your virtual exchange program at Santa Fe College.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sheila Lucas, and our program began as a result of a partnership between Santa Fe College and our local Gainesville Sister Cities International, which was part of the Stevens Initiative. This was after a visit from a delegation of faculty and staff from the Al-Mara School for the Deaf, which is located in the Palestinian city of Qalqilia in the West Bank. After the delegation had left, our students really wanted an opportunity to have a further connection with the students. So the virtual exchange was set up to allow about 15 students who were registered in either our ASL2 or Deaf Culture courses the opportunity to share information and exchange with their peers in Qalqilia. The virtual exchange sessions occurred outside the regular class period, so the students had to make a commitment to come to campus. There's about a 7-hour time difference between Florida and Qalqilia. So during our exchanges, our students were able to share information with each other through the use of sign language, gestures, and technology. They learned about cultural and linguistic differences in sign language, and as a result of the exchanges, our students began development on a virtual ASL and Palestinian Sign Language dictionary, which was produced by the students. And to our knowledge, this dictionary is unique. As a result also of our exchanges, we were part of a delegation that went from Santa Fe College, from Gainesville, Sister Cities, and also Sister Cities International to visit the Qalqilia School in 2017. We met with faculty, students, and administrators, and while there, we had a virtual exchange session with our students here at Santa Fe College.
That's great. Sheila, I want to follow up then with you. Let's drill into that a little bit more, because I think it's pretty amazing that you've used virtual exchange to connect with students who have different abilities. Tell me a little bit more. What did you hope that this virtual exchange would provide for your students at Santa Fe College?
So we hoped a couple of things. The most important thing that we wanted students to take away was a better understanding or a more global awareness of not only American deaf culture, but international deaf culture, which there are many international deaf cultures. But we also wanted our students to have a perspective of what it was like to be living in another country. And so our students during the exchanges were not only sharing signs for, you know, things like day of the week or colors, but they were also sharing signs that had cultural meaning associated with them. For example, the Palestinian sign for woman is also the sign for hijab. And so our students, some of them, this was their first interaction not only with a deaf person, but a deaf person who was coming from a completely different culture and sometimes religious experience and background. So there was a good discussion that went on about, well, what does the hijab mean in terms of Palestinian culture? Why would that be associated with a sign for woman? And so it opened up a discussion for students not only to learn more about themselves, but also learn more about another country and another culture.
Great, that's helpful. So Sherry, I want to jump to you, and the model, you know, that you have used is one where you all have designed your own courses as part of kind of the COIL methodology in virtual exchange. Tell me a little bit about what was the initial driver for you, Sherry, in starting your virtual exchange course, and then what opportunity did that provide for your students?
In short, I am part of a multi-cultural family. My husband is from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The list goes on and on. And in short, my life has been richly blessed by the exchanges that I've been involved in up close and very personal in my family. The way that I view the world isn't the same as a result of it. I got involved with COIL, as we call it, that's our virtual exchange program, because I wanted my students to have that experience, to engage with students who may look different than them, may have a different perspective, so that, again, they can learn and grow. More specifically, our project with Lebanon was, we called it Management and Cultural Influences, and we wanted to examine whether or not culture influenced the way that managers made decisions. And so they were given multiple scenarios. For example, what are the characteristics of an effective manager? And they made their list, and then they compared, and then they actually went into discussions. And some interesting things emerged as a result of that. One of the other cases that they looked at was a case where they had examined whether or not this was considered, the situation was considered sexual harassment or not. Again, kind of different perspectives. A little bit later on, I'll share with you some of their learnings, if you will. But they enjoyed it, and it goes without saying that obviously it was a positive experience for most of my students to learn from that. But again, I'll share that a little bit later with you.
Certainly, we definitely want to talk about that, because these types of skills are incredibly important for students who are studying business. I appreciate you sharing that, Sherry. Jim, let's go to you. Tell us a little bit about some of the mechanics of the CELIA program and kind of the initial driver for you to get your students involved.
Well, one thing is that in northwestern lower Michigan, we're unfortunately very white up here. About 92% of our population, the demographic profile is such. And so in my office of international services, we want to expose students to other cultures, other people, and really get them to understand what it's like, and also to look at the topics that are pertinent to them and to people around the world, and be able to dialogue that. For instance, the closest Islamic center is 2 hours away. We've seen, I mentioned we had international students come into courses, but we've seen that decline, as have most institutions in the US. We offer study abroad programs. In fact, we're one of the leaders in the country to do that. However, that just touches on a very small percentage of the students. And we know how valuable that is when you go overseas and you're able to have homestays, you're able to interact on a project, whatever that may be, there's some real some richness that comes from that. So what's the next best way to do that? If you can't get overseas, if we can't move our campus down south, one of the things is to begin a virtual exchange program. So obviously it involves technology, and here I may be sounding like somebody from the 70s, but technology is the wave of the future, right? And if it's there, let's use it to the best advantage that we can.
Absolutely.
Great, great. So I want to drill into that a little bit more. I mean, Jim, sometimes you mentioned that technology is not something that something that has to be managed, and can sometimes there can be barriers that are presented to implementing a program. So Jim, I'd be curious, given kind of the unique community college context where you are operating in, can you describe some of the barriers that you faced in launching this particular program on your campus and how you overcame them?
Sure, happy to do that. Let's start with technology. First of all, we had to make sure that we had a platform that we could use with the CALIA program. And when we first started it, as I mentioned, there were some hurdles. The first semester went relatively well. We improved, and CALIA improved on those in the incoming or the additional semesters. And now it's at a point where we rarely have any problem connecting with students from around the world. So having a media services area, an educational technology program that can help with that was crucial. So that, that was a barrier in the beginning, but as I say, we've really sort of wiped out any problems with that that we initially had. Another thing was cost, right? For a community college, that can be a heavy lift if you're going to do something like this. So what we wanted to do is try and make it, number one, affordable to the students. We didn't want to put the cost of this on their backs, but we also wanted to see what the results would be to have them join in on something like this. So we worked out a way with the Stevens Initiative to offer the CALIA program at a much lower cost than it was for universities. So it helped us to sort of jump on board with that. Now in my office, we shouldered some of the cost. I built it into my budget. We did add a fee for students, but it wasn't an extensive fee. So, we got past that. And initially we thought, well, maybe students won't sign up and register for the class if they know that there's going to be an extra cost. That was not the case. They were interested in it and have been ever since we started. So that was one thing. The other thing is scheduling non-traditional students, because if you're not doing this in a specific course, a scheduled course time, like we weren't, we had it as a component of the class, but students were often logging in for 2 hours outside of class. And as I told the students, it's like your homework, right? You're out there and you would be spending a couple hours a week on your homework. Let's try this. But again, even with that, that certainly non-traditional students have families, they have jobs. Sometimes it doesn't work for everyone. So we're still trying to sort of troubleshoot that.
Jim, I want to ask you one more follow-up. You mentioned that sometimes the curricular part of doing the virtual exchange may not work with older students who may have, as you mentioned, sort of family obligations or different things like that. How do you navigate that in a community college context? And I'm going to share, and Sheila, I'm going to ask you guys the same question as well.
Well, specifically in my course, I offer an option. I mean, the CALIA virtual exchange program is part of the course. The students know that prior to registering, so they should sort of prepare on that, because we do have a description in our schedule. But as I mentioned, it doesn't always work. So what do we do with these students? Well, we usually have a couple each semester that can't do that. So I offer an alternative for them of a research paper that they will do during that time, focused on one of the areas that we study in the course. So we have to be flexible in that case. And
Gotcha.
We try and do the best we can.
Gotcha. Sherry, I want to jump back to you then. Can you share a little bit about some of the barriers that you faced in launching your virtual exchange and how you navigated those barriers?
And I will share that with you at two levels. First of all, let's talk about the actual course. The way we structure our course, again, if I go back to the management and cultural influence module that we did with AUT in Lebanon, our students walk in not necessarily knowing that they're going to be involved with a virtual exchange, but we have a coordinator who heads up our Global Learning Center. We actually had her to come in to talk to the students about what to expect. It's not, for us, it's not an option, because we are actually addressing the learning outcomes as part of the course. For example, dealing with conflict or employees that are underperforming. Again, it's actually one of the learning outcomes. So we're engaging students in achieving the learning outcomes by doing this COIL module. And so after they have an understanding of how we're going to achieve it using virtual exchange, they have about a week to opt out and take the course through another venue. But I must tell you that I'm finding that it's actually helping to retain students, in the sense that that they want to be engaged with students in other places. But some of the other barriers are around. Sometimes there's been a imbalance in terms of class size, and thank goodness we do have institutional support. And so my institution has made some adjustments around that. We happen to be very fortunate to have a center, a media center that helps us to do recordings and things of that nature. Time difference was an issue, so we recorded iMessage. We went into our video studio and recorded our reflections and messages to our Lebanese partners, again, because we were not able to actually have the virtual exchange. So a number of ways that we've worked around these barriers, but once again, very happy to have institutional support with finding funding, like the gracious support of the Stevens Initiative to even make it possible. So
that's great. It's great to hear, Sheila, that you had that sort of flexibility in using a different technological tool when the technology didn't perform as planned. I do want to drill in on one part of something you said, is you talked a little bit about the importance of balance in class size. Why did you feel that was important to mention?
You meant Sherry or Sheila?
Excuse me, Sherry. Excuse me.
Sherry, that's okay.
Pardon me.
I give you an example in the Mexican partnership, not so much with the Stevens Initiative, but we had 18 students to, if it had gone the proper way, to 38 students. And so allowing for a reduction in class to allow for a more balanced exchange.
More discussion.
For the students.
Gotcha.
Right? And they can't do that on an ongoing basis forever, but certainly trying to get initiatives off the ground, those things, help a great deal.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that, Sherry. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Sheila, I want to jump back to you then and talk to us a little bit about some of the barriers that you faced in launching this virtual exchange on your campus, and how did you overcome those barriers?
So with launching our virtual exchange, we had 3 barriers that were really a problem at the very beginning. The first was, of course, the time difference. Being a 7-hour time difference, technology was also a barrier for us, because our school, our virtual exchange partner, the school is located in a geographical area that is in a very sensitive part of the world. And so there were issues with how do we get an equipment to an area that doesn't have easy access points? How do we establish internet connections for the virtual exchange? And so having a partnership with Gainesville Sister Cities International was very crucial for us, because they already had the connections with not only the Amara school, but they also had the connections with the local officials in the area. So they were able to help get the equipment to the school and help to make that access point for us to be able to do the virtual exchange. Language was also a barrier for us, because we were dealing with not only the difference between American Sign Language and Palestinian Sign Language, but we also had language barriers with spoken English and spoken Arabic. So we were dealing many times with translators and interpreters. So that was also a barrier for us as well. So it took a little bit of time to get the project off the ground, get everything in place. And also when our students came to campus, making sure that the students on the other side were also present too. So we had some time coordination that we had to do.
Great. Thank you for that, Sheila.
Can I interject this as well?
Sure, Sheila. Sure.
Very quickly, some of the other issues are around actually identifying an international partner. That's a barrier. Working through the learning module that's going to be offered to the students, things of that nature. And so SUNY actually helps us find international partners, and they send us through a 5-week course to help us to work through different issues, like what platform we're going to use. Are we going to enroll in our system or into our partner's system? Again, thinking about how you're going to handle technology differences. So those tools really help to mitigate some of the problems up front by, again, offering that 5-week training course. And I think that that's very, very important.
Great. Jim, I want to jump to you. How did you get buy-in to be able to do the virtual exchange in your course and on your campus? Jim, you're on mute real quick. Take it off mute. There you go.
There we go. Okay.
There you go.
I'm in a great position to get buy-in because of the nature of my job here at MC, which is to promote and enhance global learning on campus. So I have the ear of faculty, I have the ear of the president and the vice president. So we are a very forward-thinking institution, which is fantastic. And obviously not all community colleges are in that ballpark, but we've been lucky enough to do something like that and realize the importance of understanding the world. So, you know, it did take a few conversations. We had to show some statistics, obviously, some data and some research on why this was good. And of course, I have to submit that following courses that I do or other faculty do, just to make sure that the takeaway is there and that we're really providing our students with a very important aspect of education here at the college. So yeah, that was not necessarily that difficult. We do have, with the program, I require my students to keep journals. So we have that reflective piece, and as you know, and maybe some others do out there, experiential learning is sort of a hot topic. We are involved with that. Just started this past year, even though faculty have been doing it for years. We now have an institute at our institution that will be promoting that. And one of the key aspects of experiential learning is the reflection piece. So getting students to look back and say, you know, consider what they've learned, what opinions have changed, and how they intend to use it in the future is a very valuable skill to have. So we build that into all of our virtual exchange programs.
Thank you, Jim. Sheila, I want to jump to you real quick. How did you get buy-in to do this virtual exchange? And Sherry, I'm coming to you with the same question.
Okay, I'm ready.
Sheila, go ahead and jump in first, please.
Okay, so we had buy-in from the very beginning. And our senior administration, from our president, from our vice president, our associate vice presidents, have all been on board with this because we have an initiative here at the college to internationalize not only our classrooms, but our curriculum as well.
Gotcha.
So we saw this as an expansion of our internationalization project. And the support has been phenomenal. We've also had support from our grants office and our development office. And so everyone was on board. Our faculty have been on board. Our faculty colleagues have been on board with what we've been doing, seeing the value in not only getting the students engaged in cross-cultural learning, but also getting them involved in a project that's going to benefit their peers over in the Calcalia School, I think was something that our senior administration recognized that was of great value, not only to the college, but also our students.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Sheila. Sherry, before I come to you, I just want to remind the audience to start thinking of your questions and start sending them into the chat box. We've got a few more minutes left of this portion of the discussion, then we'll turn to the audience for Q&A. So Sherry, I want to come to you and ask you how you got buy-in for your virtual exchange.
Well, as I said in the at the outset, we're fortunate to be a part of a system that saw the need for virtual change, collaboration as far back as 2006. So we have it at the state level, we have it at the community college. And that makes things so much easier. And it's important to put resources around things that you say are important.
Absolutely.
All right.
They're a
And so
reflection of our values.
yeah, but there are some challenges, and part of that, for example, is actually around recruiting faculty. If you really think about it, very often our plates are full.
Mm-hmm.
And so for some, it may feel like just one more thing, but I truly believe that educators should be at the forefront of keeping the doors of communications open, helping our students to become global citizens.
Mm.
And I think that the need is even stronger than ever now, given this current wave of intolerance that's sweeping the globe. And so for
Sure.
the faculty, yes, it's a bit more work, but I say to them, it's a way that you can make new friends in different parts of the world. You'll learn about new online technology. You have an opportunity to travel abroad if that floats your boat. And for us, as well as educators, it's an opportunity for us to challenge assumptions that we have about the rest of the world. So
That's wonderful.
that's a
Thank
challenge.
you. No, thank you. That's the faculty buy-in piece is incredibly important, especially given the tensions that faculty members are under. So, Jim, I want to come to you because one of the ways obviously you can convince people is with data. I think you shared a little bit about that. How are you all measuring the success of your virtual exchange? How are you measuring impact at your institution?
So first, let me tell you a little bit about what we do with the CELIA program. They are very good. For instance, when our students log on, I mentioned that they do this outside of class, right? I get a report every month on their ability to be there, how long they were there, did they contribute, these type of things. So I have the data myself that I can use to grade those students, essentially. So that's very helpful. Again, the journals are important as we look at how the students initially got into the project, what their thoughts were and what they were at the end. And again, they do a pre-survey and a post-survey on this. So there's a richness that we have with the data that we perform. And then the CELIA program also provides the statistics that they use overall with all of their institutions. And we find that, for instance, 90% of the students improve their skills in cross-cultural communications. I mean, you would expect that, and that is exactly what happens. Critical thinking and analysis, 85% of students that are involved in the virtual exchange program, that happens. And this is very similar to my students as well. Teamwork and collaborative problem solving, that's 80%. So again, the numbers are there. And so sharing these with other faculty, sharing these with administration, sharing them with the Board of Trustees is very important.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Sheila, I want to jump to you on the same question. Obviously, you had a unique population that you worked with. Tell me a little bit about how you measured impact and what was the impact that you actually did see?
So how we measured impact was we measured impact based upon student engagement, but we also measured impact upon how the conversations went during the exchanges. What was the level of understanding that occurred between the participants? Because when you're dealing with individuals that aren't necessarily sharing a common language, you're trying to assess, was there meaning, was there understanding, and how much information actually got shared and was retained. And so what we noticed that the more the students became involved with the exchange sessions, the more that they were creating their own sort of rubrics for how they were going to communicate with their peers over in Calkelia. If, for example, if sign language was not working, meaning that they could not find a common ground to try to get their point across, they were going to visual aids. They were also doing a little bit of pantomime, but they were employing technology as well. And they were employing technology through apps such as Google Translate, I believe. And it wasn't perfect, but what it did allow the students to do was to be able to use one more tool in their toolbox in order to communicate, in order to get their point across. And we saw that once students were given the opportunity and the freedom to be able to do that, that increased their engagement, and it also increased the engagement of their peers over in Calkelia.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Sherry, what about you on this issue of measurement? Certainly that's important for the business world. You're a business professor. How did you all demonstrate impact and kind of look at the impact of the virtual exchange in your class?
Student surveys, pre, mid, and post. We wanted to identify what students were expecting, what challenges were they having, what did they learn, what will they do as a result of the cultural exchange. So a lot of the questions are open-ended, and so when we look at the information, there's some common themes that actually emerge. And from that, what we see are things like, I want to learn more about my international partner, more about their daily lives. I have a new perspective. I'd like to learn a new language. By the way, they're amazed at how many languages other parts of the world are actually speaking, and speaking it fluently. But it helps us to understand that there's value. Just a small story. I had students who did not successfully complete my course, but they completed the COIL module and all the work around it. I'm not sure how to measure all of that, but my point is, the evidence is clear that students are gaining a positive experience by being involved in the virtual exchange. I do have a video link in the event that somebody's interested in actually hearing the students as they reflect on what they learned. And I'm happy to share.
Great. Well, we can certainly be in touch. If any audience members want to get that kind of information, certainly respond in the chat box. If any of you want information on the SOLIA program that Jim had mentioned, we are able to get institutions involved in that program, and we've already supported them. So please email stevensinitiative@aspeninstitute.org. We're going to jump right into some Q&A from the audience. The first question I'll just throw out there, any of you speakers are interested, just raise your hands. What are best practices for faculty matchmaking across institutions? Anybody want to answer that?
I will.
Sherry, go right ahead.
Have an institution that helps you do it.
How so? How does the institution help you do it?
They have a network at the State University of New York. They have a network to help connect global partners, and it removes one of the barriers. So I'm very grateful that you're going to hear me say that a lot, but I really mean it. But that's what I want to say about that.
That's great. So perhaps go, check out maybe if you've got a provost's office, if you have someone who's managing international partnerships, that may be a great place to start. Sheila or Jim, do you want to chime in on this question of matchmaking, or should we go to the next question?
I'll just add that I agree 100% with Sherry. I think having that connection on your campus, if you have an internationalization office on your campus, sometimes even working with your International Student Services office is also beneficial. But also reaching out to your community partners, reaching out to your colleagues, not only in community college, but also at the university level as well.
Great. And certainly we've heard a lot of faculty members develop substantive virtual exchange partnerships by going to, certainly you can come to the Stevens Initiative Forum that we host almost annually. Sign up for our listserv, you'll get information on that. You can meet certainly institutional partners, but other professional associations, places like NAPSA, AIEA, are great places to meet virtual exchange partners. Let's go to the next question. How is virtual exchange incorporated into an existing curriculum versus being a standalone project? What a great question. Jim, I'm going to throw that to you.
So that was something that we had to obviously figure out. We were all excited to do this, but again, I think as Sherry said, yeah, faculty are busy. Curriculums are set, right? How do you pull something that is time inclusive into what you're doing? And I think the preparation has to start early on that. You can't decide in August that you're going to start that in September, right? And you have to rework some of that curriculum and look at what pieces do I take out that the virtual exchange will fulfill. I was able to do that, after some sort of investigative thought in my curriculum, because I realized the benefit of them exchanging with, or having this exchange with students on a weekly basis was more long-lasting than some of the things that I had previously done in class, even though I felt those were very important, and they still are, because I still teach a section without the virtual exchange piece in it. I really truly feel that if you ask one of my students 2 years, 3 years from now, what do they remember from the class, the virtual exchange is going to pop right to the top.
I appreciate that. Sheila or Sherry, would you guys have any really quick thoughts to add in on incorporating virtual exchange into an existing curriculum versus a standalone activity?
I highly would recommend to find a way to include it in the curriculum because, again, it's going to be another level of work. The issue is finding a creative way to do that. So for my entrepreneurship class, part of what they need to do is to develop and know how to market a product or service. And so with our Mexican partners, they're achieving it through a product or service that they jointly decide that they're going to work on. So it's just another avenue. In my online class, they do it as a project. So think out of the box and find a way to incorporate it as opposed to standalone. Where there's a will, there will be a way.
That's right. That's right. I'm going to jump to the next question. Audience, keep these great questions coming in. Make sure you drop them in the chat box. The next question is, how do you address language barriers? Sheila, I'm going to toss that to you because I know you guys had some language barriers in your program. How did you address them?
So it was creative sometimes. Sometimes we were not able to get our point across in either a spoken language or in sign language. And so we used a lot of visual aids. For example, when we did a session on animals, we did not rely necessarily on the signs, but what we did is we showed pictures. And then whenever the students would see this picture, they would show us their sign, we would show them our sign. And so we were able to have learning exchanges there. Sign language can be very intuitive because it is visual. And sometimes you don't even need to know, you don't even know because it's more iconic sometimes, not always, but sometimes the sign may be a bit iconic to where you can get maybe an idea or a guess about what's being said, and then you can kind of see whether or not that's really what's going to be the meaning of the sign. So we used a variety of techniques. We used a variety of just a variety of ways to try to get our point across, including Google Translate, like I said before, which is not always the best, but it did help spur the discussion.
Great, I appreciate that. Anybody else want to chime in on that particular question?
Yeah, one thing that the SLEA program does, and I think this has been very helpful for our students and for students they're communicating with, is they start the first session asking about family or music or pets, something that people feel very comfortable with, even though English is not their first language. You know, they know it well, and they'll sort of extend and try and answer something, as opposed to the heavy topics which come later. So, you know, using those very simple, very important and common areas is a critical piece.
That's great. I'll just add that we've seen some virtual exchange practitioners, in order to maintain a bit of balance, in the dynamic that takes place during the virtual exchange, they'll conduct part of it in English and part of it in a second language, perhaps in Arabic or in Spanish, just to keep both sets of students. You know, some will use their first language at one point, and the others will use their first language in another point, just to maintain a bit of balance. We're seeing certainly a lot more discussion in the virtual exchange field around that particular topic of language and power dynamics. So I appreciate whoever asked that question. Thank you. The next question, go ahead, Sherry.
It wasn't a major problem for us because many of the students spoke English in Lebanon, and then the international economics class in Mexico, they spoke English. But the point is, my students really gained a deeper understanding of how well other people speak other languages. So that was a major takeaway. But one of the things that we did do, we meaning the professors that I work with, we were very conscious to have them to respond or put their presentations together using as few words as possible, because speaking and writing may not necessarily be the same. So we were very sensitive about that portion of it, and so try to minimize the writing, technical writing portion of it.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that, Sherry. Next question for the audience, for our panelists is any specific examples of projects outside of group dialogue, so perhaps more collaborative in nature. I don't know that any of you all did any science projects. We've certainly seen a few of those in our funding portfolios, but I'll open this up to any of the three of you all who can address again specific examples of projects outside of group dialogue.
Well, our students developed a dictionary. And so that was outside of the virtual exchange, even though the virtual exchange was instrumental in giving us the signs necessary to begin the project. That project was very much student driven, in which the students were participating. The students were the ones that were performing the signs. And so what we found is that the students were taking their learning and then they were using that learning in order to produce this dictionary. So we felt that was a great example of some collaborative effort and collaborated learning that was going on outside of the exchange.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll also add, for those audience members who are interested, check out the Stevens Initiative website for information on the Chicago Sister Cities project, where students developed an exhibit of a dinosaur for an online museum. The William Davidson Institute project, where students developed business case studies. The IREX project, where students developed sustainability solutions together. And the Karam Foundation project, where students, after their virtual exchange, developed prosthetics using 3D printing. So certainly a lot of opportunity to integrate different learning activities into the virtual exchange, and certainly enhanced by the dialogue. Final question before we go to the lightning round is, do you all have a sense of an optimal time for a virtual exchange, an optimal time for students to do a virtual exchange activity? Any of you want to take that?
Sure, I'll start out. I mean, that is difficult, right? There's no perfect time. Just put it that way, because again, you're dealing with different time zones. I think the CELIA Connect program has done a pretty good job of trying to arrange times that work for someone in Egypt and someone in Traverse City, Michigan. So that person, my student in Traverse City, Michigan, may have to get on and start their dialogue at 6:30 in the morning, or 5 at night, or later in the evening. But again, that's what they're tasked with, not the student, but the organization that we deal with is trying to connect those time frames. Again, I don't do it in my class because I have a lot of other material I need to cover. But outside of class, and students know that, it seems to work.
Wonderful, thank you. Sherry, go ahead and jump in.
I mentioned briefly that SUNY takes partners through a 5-week program where we literally have discussions about timing, schedule, exams, all of that. And again, it just helps so much. And so what we found is typically 3 weeks after the semester starts, and sometimes we need to juggle that because we start and stop at different times. And then where there's an overlap with exam schedules, we have exams, they have exams, we typically pull it forward. So that's a short way of saying, a long way of saying, in the middle somewhere, but working through all of that ahead of time, but certainly not at the outset, definitely not at the end of the semester.
Right, I appreciate it. Sheila, anything to add on that question?
No, we basically found the same to be true, is that you know, working around the middle part of the semester and coordinating not only time, but coordinating with the other partner for any sort of holidays, breaks, exam schedules, and then trying to fit all that within the schedule. Yeah, it takes time, but I do want to give major kudos to our students for participating in the exchange, because early morning is not the favorite time of day for most students. So they were real. They were really excited to do the exchange, and we're glad that they invested the time with it.
I appreciate that. Those are all very thoughtful answers, so thank you guys so much. We have a few minutes before the webinar ends, so I want to do a little bit of a lightning round with our three speakers before we wrap up. Every campus is going to have its unique challenges, and certainly all of the courses that you all teach are unique, and student needs will certainly vary based on those students and their career paths and their lives. What advice would you give to someone who is interested in bringing virtual exchange to their community college? I really would love to hear from you all as experts and as folks who have done this. So Sheila, why don't we start with you? What advice would you give to someone who wants to start virtual exchange at a community college campus?
I would say do it. I would say do it. I mean, that's the easy answer, right? I would say do it, but I would also say before you bring the exchange in, have your plan mapped out. And exchanges, they're organic. I mean, they grow and they develop as we go along, but have your plan mapped out in terms of what is it that you're hoping to accomplish? How will you get buy-in from your college and your community? And then reach out to your fellow faculty, reach out to your students, find out what it is that they're wanting to get, and then bring it all in together. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you so much. Sherry, let's go to you. What advice would you give? Sage advice.
First of all, ditto to everything that was said there. Recognize that sometimes technology will fail you. Just know that you can live through it, and be flexible and fluid in the planning of the course module, for example. That's very important.
Thank you so much. Jim, last question.
So I would say, again, topics that we've dealt with and my students have dealt with: immigration, extremism, equality, gender issues, stereotypes, environmental issues, media influence. All of these things are critically important to a student, whether they're studying chemistry or whether they're studying social work. So the ability to have this on campus and be able to integrate and dialogue with people across the world is extremely important. What you need to do is you need to seek out those faculty members that are receptive to that, that are excited about doing that. And sometimes it's the new hires, and sometimes it's the people, them on your campus. So get them on your team and help them to get connected to a program such as CELIA or IREX or, the many others that are out there.
That's great. Thank you so much for that advice, Jim, Sherry, and Sheila. I really want to thank you guys, the three of you, for being on being on this webinar and sharing kind of your journey with virtual exchange and your stories and how it's impacted your students and your campus. For the audience that was on here, thank you guys so much for being on today's webinar. A great topic to dig into. We're going to try to follow up with some of you who have submitted questions that we didn't get to. Our team here at the Stevens Initiative will try to connect with you all and answer some of your questions. So we certainly appreciate that. Make sure you sign up for our listserv so you can be alerted to our next webinar. We've got an exciting one coming up in a few weeks that we'll be sharing some information about, as well as a really exciting case study about a virtual exchange project that'll be released very, very soon. So if you're not on our listserv, you won't get that information. I will share, just to echo what Jim noted, if any of you are interested in joining an existing virtual exchange program, we have several that are available right now for community college faculty members to join. That is the CELIA project, the IREX project that we're supporting, and a really exciting one by World Learning. So please reach out to us at Stevens Initiative at aspeninstitute.org, and we can certainly plug you in. I would also encourage you to check out the resources page on our website, www.stevensinitiative.org, for some wonderful toolkits, access to additional webinars like this one, and just more resources. And of course, if you have any feedback, any needs that we can address, please let us know. That's the end of today's webinar, folks. I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you to the audience, and thank you to our wonderful panelists for joining us and sharing their expertise. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Thanks, folks.